All right, today we're talking about Intel's GPUs and their, well, let's call it a redemption arc. For years, the story with Arc has been the same, right? So much potential, but just buried under a mountain of software problems. So we're going to dive deep into about a year's worth of data and see if Intel has finally slayed its biggest dragon. So let's get right into it. For any new GPU to have a shot, it just has to work. Simple as that. But for Intel, the real fight wasn't against AMD or NVIDIA. Not really. It was a war against their own software. Buggy, unstable, just a total nightmare for users. So the big question we're asking today is that battle finally over? Okay, to really get a feel for how far they've come, we gotta rewind. Let's go back 3 years to the launch of the first Arc GPUs. The software was, to put it nicely, a complete and total mess. Seriously, it was the kind of thing only a super dedicated enthusiast with a ton of free time and patience would even think about touching. And look, it wasn't just one big problem. No, it was more like death by 1,000 cuts. We're talking constant driver crashes, drivers that would literally just corrupt themselves, forcing you to do a full reinstall. Then there was this weird, confusing 2-app setup for all your settings. And on top of all that, you got forced bloatware and just a never-ending stream of notifications popping up. It was rough. Really rough. But you know what? To Intel's credit, it really seems like they were listening. Instead of just chasing benchmarks, they spent the last couple of years basically cleaning house. They rolled up their sleeves and started tackling the biggest complaints one by one. So let's take a look at what they've actually fixed. First up, and this is a big one, they just simplified everything. Remember that confusing 2-app system where you never knew where to find anything? Gone. They got rid of it. Now it's just one single consolidated app, the Intel graphics software. It's such a massive improvement. Finding and changing settings is finally, straightforward. And that forced bloatware? Yep, gone too. The installer used to shove the driver support assistant down your throat, no questions asked. Well, now, get this. The checkboxes actually work. Imagine that. You have full control. You can install only the core driver if that's all you want. It sounds like a small thing, but man, it's a huge win for anyone who hates clutter. Oh, and they finally silenced all that noise. Those toast notifications that would just constantly pop up and flood your screen, they're pretty much gone. In all the recent testing, maybe 1 or 2 were spotted, down from, dozens. It's a huge quality of life improvement that just makes the whole thing feel so much more polished and professional. And all this really points to a big shift in strategy, It feels like Intel finally realized they couldn't do everything all at once. At first, they were trying to check every single box on the marketing list to compete with NVIDIA and AMD. But they made a really smart pivot. They stopped chasing features, they cut things like built-in streaming, and they just focused on the absolute core mission, making the darn thing stable. Okay, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows just yet. The road to redemption is still a little bumpy. The progress they've made is undeniable, for sure. But when you really dig into the latest drivers, well, there are still some pretty significant bugs and frustrations hiding in there. And this is the big one. During all this testing, there was one crash that was so bad it completely corrupted the graphics driver. Like Windows couldn't even display video properly anymore. The only way to fix it was a complete from-scratch reinstall. Now, to be fair, it only happened once. They couldn't even make it happen again. But a bug that catastrophic, that's a major, major red flag. For your average person who just wants to play a game, that kind of problem is an absolute deal breaker. And beyond that one massive failure, there's still a whole list of little annoyances. The performance monitor built into the software? Basically useless. It gives you numbers that are just wildly wrong. And those fancy features meant to make your game smoother, like Smart VSync or Speed Sync? Super unreliable. Sometimes they work once, then break. Sometimes they just crash your game from the get-go. It's just a whole bunch of little things that show it's still lacking that final layer of polish. But, okay, those bugs are only one side of the coin. On the other side, you've got the data. And the numbers show an Intel that is seriously committed. They are relentlessly pushing out updates, supporting new games, and fixing bugs. The data really tells a story of a company that is fighting tooth and nail to catch up. Okay, check this out. 87%. What is that? That's the percentage of major new games where Intel had a game-ready driver out on or even before launch day. Now for us, gamers, that is a huge deal. It means you can buy a new game, hit play, and expect it to work. It proves Intel is finally taking day one support seriously. And just look at the sheer pace of their updates. Over the last 10 months, Intel has dropped 29 driver updates. 29. That's more than NVIDIA and even way more than AMD. Now sure, quantity isn't everything, but that kind of aggressive schedule shows you they are all in on fixing stuff and supporting games as fast as humanly possible. And if we dig a little deeper into those updates, you can see real, measurable progress. Looking at their patch notes, they've officially squashed 81 different issues. And for the bugs they publicly admit to, the known issues, it's taking them, on average, just under 40 days to get a fix out. That shows a pretty solid process. They find a bug, and they get it fixed. So, we've seen the good, we've seen the bad, and we've looked at the numbers. It all comes back to that one big question. With all this amazing progress, but with those few scary flaws still hanging around, who should actually buy an Intel Arc GPU right now in 2025? You know, this quote from Gamers Nexus really just hits the nail on the head. They said, it basically feels like a different company at this point. And it's so true. The transformation from the disaster of the first-gen Alchemist launch to where they are now, it is a night and day difference. It seriously feels like their whole software team has been reborn. So here's the bottom line. It really depends on what kind of person you are. Are you an enthusiast, someone who likes to tinker, who knows how to troubleshoot, and doesn't mind an occasional bug? If that's you, then yeah, absolutely, Arc is a totally viable and even compelling choice now. But what about that impatient friend? You know the one, the person who has zero patience for tech problems and calls you the second something goes wrong. For them, not yet. That tiny risk of a show-stopping bug is still just a little too high for a hassle-free recommendation. Look, there's no question Intel has made a monumental leap. They pulled their software back from the absolute brink, and now they are a serious player. But they're still up against giants who've been refining their drivers for decades. So that leaves us with one final thought, a question for you. Intel has made a night and day improvement. But in this market, is being almost there good enough?